My name is Jessa Clutie. I am moving from second grade to third grade for this next school year. I chose the topic flexible grouping and specifically how groups impact math instruction. I chose this topic because my math instruction tends to use blended learning strategies, specifically station rotations. I touched on flexible grouping this year, but I still relied on ability grouping at times in math. This is a little video from my actual math class this school year, and as you can see, they do have a variety of groupings and a different and flexible grouping in the sense that the different groups are doing different tasks. However, I wanted to learn more about how to best set up my kids to have better conceptual understanding and be able to communicate in math better. I want to be able to use my groupings to their full advantage and help these students the best I can in math. All three of the articles I read showed very similar findings, but the one that I chose specifically focused on math groups. One of the big parts in my article were these 4 recommendations for catalyzing and strengthening change in math. When looking at how to help students, the research suggested these 4 ideas. These ideas are based on high school mathematics, but they are relevant and necessary at all levels. The biggest recommendation was to create experiences in mathematics where students can explore, create, and simply enjoy math. Rather than learning through listening to the teacher, students need the opportunities to experience math and problem solve in order to figure things out. This helps students to make the connections that are needed later on. The second recommendation was to avoid all student tracking. Students of all abilities and backgrounds need the same material, just presented in different ways and with different support. This is where flexible grouping comes into play. Students are able to work in mixed ability groups that change when needed based on the task, interests, and expectations. It's important to acknowledge that tracking students helps in a positive way and in a negative way. And so we don't want to pull students based on their ability, whether that means they're high or they're low. The next recommendation is that all instruction is backed by research. Teaching practices such as meaningful questioning and facilitating meaningful math discourse will assist students in gaining that deeper conceptual understanding that we need. The last point focused on high school, but it reiterates the importance of not ability grouping students and allowing them to stay on the same path for mathematics. Taking all 4 years in high school is something that isn't always standard. Sometimes students are only taking 3. And so keeping them, especially on that shared pathway those first 2 years, is very helpful. This quote stood out to me, and it's one that I wanted to be sure to share with you. It says, "Furthermore, equitable teaching continually emphasizes the essential role of mathematics reasoning and sense-making in developing deep and connected understanding of mathematical concepts and procedures." I appreciate this because equitable teaching and flexible grouping goes hand in hand. It's important that we don't lessen content or not teach certain skills to students simply because they're maybe on a lower track. How would flexible grouping look in my classroom? The article outlined 3 main ways, and so that's what I'd like to share with you. First of all, math groups. In math groups, students possibly have 2 or 3 tasks that could include written practice, partner work, math games, or manipulatives. These are done with different groups or partners depending on the task, but not dependent on the student's ability. Most of the time, all of these tasks are done with partners or groups. Very little individual work was used in these groupings. However, typically at the end of the group time, a checkout ticket or some sort of small assessment is done in an independent way so that teachers can assess students and where they are. While the students are working on their groups, the teacher would meet with individuals or small groups to reinforce, provide guided practice, or extend lessons. This can be done based on ability. However, it's important to acknowledge that this is still flexible grouping because it is not purely on ability. The rest of the content is done in mixed groups. Another part of flexible grouping is interventions. Interventions need to be carefully designed not to lessen the material or the expectations. Interventions also shouldn't be used to drill students, but rather provide students with experiences so that they can make connections. The article said mathematic instruction in intervention settings should be consistent with research-informed, equitable teaching practices in addition to the grade level curriculum so that students do not continue to fall further behind their peers. We don't want to simply widen the gap and have students who are lower continue to get lower and students who are higher continue to get higher. We want to raise everybody up and help them in the best possible way. The third acknowledgement about flexible grouping is accelerated programs. And while accelerated programs would be judging students based on their ability, it is still an appropriate part of mathematical education because it differs from ability grouping. Students who are using these accelerated programs shouldn't have any concepts skipped or rushed in order to move beyond the normal curriculum. The misconception that I chose to talk about is that ability grouping is needed for differentiation. And as I talked about on the last slide, you can use differentiation and even small group differentiation while still not using ability grouping. Students work in teams to solve problems and support, while the teacher only can assist the students as needed, but yet the teacher is assisting all students simply in different ways. Because I'm not standing in front of the class giving information, it also gives the teacher time to walk around, ask questions, scaffold as needed to lower students. Differentiation using these flexible groups is much more personal. Along with this, it can be easy to group high ability learners with a low ability learner, but in reality that doesn't necessarily help either student. If we only do that, the low ability learner will likely rely on that high ability learner for every aspect. Sometimes pairing students who simply like the same topic might be a good group because it might force another student to become a leader in that group. Groups can be moved, adjusted, and switched based on the task, the number of students needed, the current understandings of the students' interests, or the child's readiness to move on. As a teacher, you want to set the expectations that all members of the group work together to ensure that each student has a good understanding. This connects the talk moves and the peer communication to reinforce that math understanding. Our text states that we want to have students make that shift in their mindset to peers being their first line of defense. Peers are their go-to for their questions first, and then the role of the teacher is there to assist when the whole group needs help. Essentially, doing these problem-based math problems in groups, it allows for groups to communicate and deepen math understandings as they also grow their teamwork, problem-solving, and communication skills. Flexible grouping connects very closely to these 5 dimensions of productive classrooms, and I want to focus on one of them in particular. I think that it connects to the agency, authority, and identity very well. Our text states that learning is enhanced when children are engaged with others who are working on the same ideas. Encouraging student-to-student dialogue that involves making conjectures, explaining, justifying, and building each other's ideas can help children think of themselves as capable of making sense and doers of mathematics. The goal requires that the teacher create the classroom culture so that one child can learn from another. It's important that we use these groupings to help further understanding, specifically in math as students explain their thinking or can identify misconceptions that maybe their partner might have. Flexible grouping supports the math process, but also the social process, and both are needed for the development of these students. So what can we do? With all this new information about flexible grouping, I think one of the most important things we can do is to stop ability grouping. We don't want to send inaccurate information to students about their ability simply based on their groups. Flexible grouping helps set up all students for success and helps them all gain confidence in mathematics while also still deepening their math understanding and their math ability to communicate. Even though ability grouping is a practice that has been used for a long time, we know better, so we want to do better for our students to help them become successful math students.